Pipeline Tonight, episode 3, and I'm Chris McCon, your host. This has been great so far, just meeting new people, and we've had good response over the first week. And so now for episode 3, we're going to talk about literacy, reading, children reading, and I got to see maybe some of the highlights and lowlights, and I got a very cursory overview of what the problem was, and it's been a while now. So time and the fact that I didn't really get into the details, I'm going to be learning on this show, but we have someone who has been neck deep in this and who has a personal incentive to make sure to see this through. And she's one of many in Pipeline who really worked with the administration, with the board, with the teachers. But we're happy to have Jennifer Hyland with us today. And Jennifer, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Jennifer Hyland. I grew up in Spring Branch ISD. My mom went to Springwoods High School. And then I went through Nottingham, Spring Forest, and Stratford. And my kids have gone through Rummel Creek, Memorial Middle, and Stratford. My youngest is a 9th grader at Stratford right now. My husband and I met at Rice. He had really never lived in Houston, so when it was time for us to find some place to move, I said, well, I know the best place. And so we moved back to Spring Branch, where I grew up. I come to this discussion having not really ever expected to be here. Everything was normal with my kids, I thought, until 2nd grade when my daughter Jill came home and got off the bus one day sobbing uncontrollably. And I could tell she'd been crying for a while. And I said, what happened to you at school today? And I immediately went inside and called the school, and they wanted to have a meeting with me. And from there, it was kind of a whirlwind that she was diagnosed with dyslexia. And I found myself having to learn a lot about something I'd never even heard of before. And so that's what really set me on this path, where I got my start.
Yes. So in my work, I go talk to state government leaders, elected officials, leaders of some of the state agencies in the larger states. For the past 3 years, a recurring theme, whether I'm in Georgia or Arkansas, maybe 6 or 7 meetings that I can think of where we're either in the Department of Education or the tangential department that has to do with youth. Common theme, they all say something like literacy is this raging inferno right now. And it's just happened recently.
Yes.
And COVID exacerbated it, but it wasn't COVID that started it. And so I was just ignorant on it. And, I don't have some solution from my company to be able to come in and fix literacy. But I do know that is a problem. And so maybe let's talk about what, if we can try to summarize Sold a Story, which is another podcast that I encourage listeners who want to get deeper into the whole story to go listen to. Sold a Story. It's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but it frames the problem. It goes back however many years you have to go back, and then I think it's 6 episodes. But can you just try to summarize that in, 5-10 minutes?
Sure, I can do that. Actually, Emily Hanford, who did the Sold a Story podcast, has actually been working on this sort of thing since, I believe it's 2011. I mean, it's been a while. Mm-hmm. She's been out there. She started also with dyslexia, and she finally came to the point where she released this entire podcast about the state of literacy in the United States. I will say, us dyslexia moms through our journey, we came to realize that really what hurt our children the most was that they weren't being taught correctly. And so, 35% of kids can learn to read with whatever instruction is offered. The other 60% of kids need a direct, explicit instruction in how language works. Mm-hmm. When you think about humans, learning to speak is one of the most natural things. I mean, we're cooing at our babies and they're cooing back. And so language develops naturally. Reading hasn't really been around as long. And it involves many more processes in the brain. It's not just the sound, it's taking the words from the page, translating them, understanding them. There's a lot of processes that go on. So if we reach out to these kids and get them the instruction, the specific instruction that they need, then they can learn to read as well. So what happened, why this really became such a thing, was because in 2020 during COVID, kids were learning at home. They were on the computer. A lot of times their parents were in the room listening to the lessons or hearing what was going on. They were having to also be the instructors. And what a lot of parents realized was their kids weren't really learning at all. Mm-hmm. And especially, obviously COVID was hard, but I think it exposed a lot of the gaps that parents had never seen before. And so when Emily Hanford was working on this, she really highlighted the things that parents were seeing at home and really explained the differences between what the schools were doing and what they should be doing. And so I think that, like I said before, a lot of us dyslexia parents had been talking about this for years. But I mean, we're just a bunch of moms, with our concerns and what do we know, but having somebody really do the research, put it all together, put all of that out there for the public, made a really big difference. And it caught on like wildfire. And I mean, I texted it to everybody I knew. And I said, you got to listen to this podcast, which
illustrated a national problem. It's not like we're talking about some problem that's unique to SBISD or to Texas schools or to TEA. Mm-hmm. This was a national problem that had been going on for years or decades.
Yes, decades. There's a lot of people may be familiar with the term balanced literacy, which is what had traditionally been used in schools for the last few decades. That was a flawed method, and it was considered student-centered, independent learning. You wanted kids to learn to love reading, so you gave them a book that they would enjoy. Where the fault lies is that they were expected to use the pictures on the page to figure out what the words below said, and there was no real explicit teaching. So what Emily Hanford was advocating for was more of a structured literacy where there's an emphasis on direct and explicit instruction of the letters, how they blend together, how they form words, and then that way, when you get to those chapter books with no pictures, you can still sound out all the words. When you're doing the other method, there's no more pictures. How are you going to figure out what the words on the page say?
Yes. And so, I grew up with phonics and sounded out. Why do you, what's the motivation to try to remove phonics completely or make it a last resort after you try cueing, I think is one of the methods, and then look at the picture and let's guess what this word could be. And sort of what I call the touchy-feely approach to reading.
Well, that was the appeal. Was the emotional appeal of we want kids to learn to love reading. Yeah. And while that's a noble goal, I argue that kids will love reading when they know how to do it. Yeah. I mean, my daughter hated reading because she couldn't do it. She thought she was stupid. And once she did learn how to read, now she loves to read. Mm-hmm. But she would never have gotten there by just having somebody shove a book in front of her face and say, "Don't you love reading?" She didn't, and that's, like I said, for 60% of the kids, that's the case because they didn't learn the way they needed to learn. And so it's a struggle instead of a joy.
So is it as simple as a small group of people who were enamored by the wrong way, the sort of emotional way, the touchy-feely way? Like they got their curriculum and their programs and they built it out and they were ambitious and they got it in, and then it just kind of stuck because it's hard to rip it out once it's in. And I mean, I've heard the name Lucy Calkins. I don't know. And I haven't gotten through, I think I've done 3 episodes of Sold a Story. So I don't know the whole
Sure.
But how did it get in at first, and then how did it stay for so long?
It's very teacher friendly. There's a lot of independent work in it, so you can send the kids off and tend to, small groups, and it's very, they have lessons that they teach, and then the kids are sent to go practice by themselves. The way that it's structured was more enjoyable for teachers. A lot of people refer to the structured literacy that we did as drill and kill. You just learn, you just keep repeating it until you finally learned it. Of course, what that does is you learned it. Whereas with the other method, you were just exploring and learning on your own. So I think that people were just mistaken. I will say that the people who were pushing it were wonderful salesmen. And you heard and sold a story. I think it was episode 3, where they were talking about how these people were worshiping Lucy Calkins. I mean, people would call the curriculum manuals their Bibles. This was like everything to them. So having sold a story come out really made a lot of people angry.
Yeah.
Because they had to confront something that they have embraced fully for their entire lives or their entire teaching careers.
Well, and where I stopped on the podcast or just haven't gotten any further, I plan to listen to the whole thing, was, George W. Bush, president. We know that his mom, as a first lady, that was her thing.
She donated to our district.
Literacy.
Her organization.
And then when you can read, so many other things get unlocked. Even her granddaughter, children's writer. So that's in that family. And even the story of George W. Bush as president himself, catching on to this problem back in 2001. Now I'm going to go down to Florida and I want to read with kids, and I'm going to do it in this sort of intentionally old-fashioned way in school that was, I think, an underprivileged school. And he's there reading with kids, and he wants to be present as president to make sure people know that this is a priority for him. And that was September 11, 2001. And then all of a sudden that has to be,
I bet a lot of people watching don't know that.
Yeah.
When he was interrupted when they came and whispered in his ear.
Yeah, everyone knows that scene.
He was talking about what we're talking about today.
Yes. And even as he's reading to the kids, someone had already whispered in his ear the second tower's been hit. And so then it goes on to, even though the shift happened to terror and that was the focus, you did have the No Child Left Behind and all the funding, but it was, you have to at least include this stuff, even if it's not a wholesale, throw out the bad stuff. You have to start including the phonics and the way that kids actually read. And the story of, I think, the New Zealand founder of the old
Reading Recovery, yes,
of Reading Recovery, she with steely eyes looked at him and said, "We will not change one single bit." She was very emotionally beholden to this thing.
Yes,
and so, but we will change the description to kind of game the system and trick people, so that we can get our funding and keep pushing it on. So is that battle still going?
Well, another component to that was because George Bush supported it, the teachers' unions hated it. They didn't even want to give it a chance. It was very politically charged at that time. There's still a group of people that pushes back very hard against changing away from balanced literacy. But I will say that I feel confident in saying that in today's world, it is very much a bipartisan issue. I interact with people on both sides of the aisle. I partner with people on both sides of the aisle. I learn. There's so many people that probably don't vote the same way I do, but we are all passionate about teaching these kids to read because we know that reading is the key to success in life. So much of a child's life is based on reading. Everything in school. You can't do word problems in math if you can't read. You can't learn history. You can't learn science unless you can read. And what we have found is that studies show that in the state of Texas, 80% of incarcerated inmates are functionally illiterate. So
illiteracy as a spark to a road towards crime?
We haven't given them the option to be successful. When they leave our schools, whether it's dropping out or graduating illiterate, which absolutely happens, what are they going to turn to? They're not employable unless we've taught them a trade, which I hope that we would, because obviously we need all the tradespeople. But if we don't encourage that route, then they've got to find a way to make it. And unfortunately, that's where they end up.
So you mentioned it's a bipartisan issue, and it galvanizes people from all different shapes and stripes and backgrounds. Even though I didn't dig into it, and it was not my kind of cause celeb as a PIPEline member, I do remember seeing a similar kind of galvanization, or people from different backgrounds coming together, seemingly agreeing that, hey, the literacy thing is a problem, that the current way is broken, and that we have to fix it. And so I guess bring us to the part when PIPEline, along with other parents and actors for literacy throughout our own community, started to take action, whether that's the trustee elections, or going and speaking before board meetings, or, trying to advocate for a new way to do it. And what did that look like?
Really, the genesis of this was that I am a personal friend of John Perez, and I just like to fill his head with things.
Trustee Perez.
Yes, I'm sorry. Trustee John Perez, yes. And so I had been talking to him before the election while he was running, and just trying to give him information, because this was an important issue to me. I had also had conversations with Trustee Lisa Alpe about literacy and why I thought it was important. Once they were elected, I continued to send them information, articles, just other research items that I found that I thought they would find interesting, because I feel like the more people know, the more they can understand why this is an important issue. So things kind of got tabled. Right after they were elected, a lot of other things came up as high priorities, and I understood. I waited my turn. Sold a Story came out in the fall of 2022, and I asked both of them to please listen, and that got the ball rolling. We had, as we always do at board meetings, we have presentations from different district people about different programs in the district, and it's just so happened about 6 weeks after Sold a Story came out, there was a presentation on literacy, and that's when we decided we needed to try and shift what we were doing in Spring Branch so that we were better serving the students of our district. And I am absolutely amazed at the energy and time and effort that Lisa Alpe and John Perez put into learning about literacy.
So that was a handshake between a group of parents, and back then it was candidates for school board, and then it became actual trustees. They won the election, the elections.
Yeah.
But then they became advocates, and they were in a position of power to do something about it, and you started to see the ball moving in the right direction.
So once they were elected, and Sold a Story came out, we started pursuing learning as much as we could, and so I would set up meetings with some experts. I would send them as many books and articles and everything as I could find to help them learn more. And I mean, I characterize it as drinking from a fire hose, right? I mean, they took everything I threw at them and took it all in and processed it and asked for more. And so, I think that because of their efforts, listening to the parents, in the district and hearing the concerns that the parents had, and opting to partner with the parents in making a difference in our district, I think that was a very positive force. And, going past that, then we had, things kind of sidetracked again because we had new board elections in the spring. We had all the recapture stuff this past spring, and a lot of the focus was on that. But in June, a group of moms went and spoke at a board meeting and petitioned the district to please form a committee to study literacy in the district and just make sure that we're doing the best that we can to educate our children. And so thankfully, the district agreed, and we formed the LCAT. We know the district really likes their their committees with the little nicknames, but that was the Literacy Curriculum Assessment Team. And we brought together trustees, parents, administrators, teachers, specialists. We had a dyslexia specialist. We had lots of people who wanted to find out, were we serving our kids the best way, and could we do better? And so we had some meetings. We were given authorization, thank you to the board, to bring in a company called TXReads, who are experts in literacy. And this specifically how kids learn to read and how to give them the best curriculum possible so that they can read. And so they did a very thorough evaluation of our curriculum. It took a couple months. They gave us a 150-page report. And so that's where we are today. We have the report, and the district is moving towards changing the literacy curriculum so that we can provide kids with the instruction that they need to be the best readers possible. And that makes me very happy.
Wow. So is it the case that the bad curriculum, the old way, the bad way, is now out, and we're waiting for the new curriculum to be finalized, or is there a transition period, or how is that working?
We are kind of in a transition period right now. We did, the district did get rid of the Lucy Calkins, the balanced literacy that we were using, and they did put in its place more of a phonics-based curriculum that more resembles structured literacy. But TXReads is going to partner with us and help us select the curriculum that will do all of the things we need. So no more, we won't have to like pick and choose pieces from different areas and put them all together. We're going to find one that covers all of the main pillars of reading, so that it's easier for the teachers, it's easier for the kids, and hopefully it's going to make the kids love reading more. That's I think the ultimate goal, right? And we would also love for it to improve test scores, right? And I know STAR is not the best measure. I do.
Well, it occurs to me that STAR. Like, it seems like no one likes STAR.
Yeah.
Like I have not found a teacher, an administrator, a student, a parent, a bystander who says STAR is great.
Yeah. And
we had our own story with testing in my own family. I've got a child who has math dyslexia. I think it's called dyscalculia, and I'm probably
I
pronouncing
think it's dyscalculia.
Dyscalculia.
But I don't know.
Yes. Well, one of my children has that. And I will say that was the first time I really saw that the state machine, okay, all the actors at the state level that says you have to do this and you have to do that, they don't care about your kid. They want to make sure that they're protected and that they don't have any spotlight shown on them. And they will do some pretty crazy things to make sure that is the case. I want to say that the teachers, I don't even blame the teachers that I'm hearing in Sold a Story, and even you and I speaking over the past week. The teachers were just doing what they were told to do. Like, this is your curriculum, do your best with it. But on testing and on my own child, I saw how they grade on a curve.
Yeah, the TEA grades kids on, does not meet grade level, approaches grade level, meets grade level, and masters grade level. And I will say, I personally expect my children to be mastering, because that's what I expect from them. I expect high performance because I know they're capable of it. And so when you realize that we're looking at these numbers and 80% of kids in third grade in Spring Branch are approaching grade level, I think what most people don't understand is that's not actually at grade level. And so when you're looking at meets grade level, it's down in the 50% range. And when you're talking about master's grade level, let's see, I've got that here. It's approaches grade level is 80%, meets grade level is 61%, and master's grade level is 32%. And, for me, I would like to see those numbers change. And I think that bringing in a new curriculum can provide a lot of that for these kids, because they're going to be getting the explicit instruction that they need.
What you just outlined, though, with those numbers sounds not so bad. Sounds even pretty good. But I think what we're trying to say here is that you have way too many kids who can't read at all or can't read nearly well enough. And the testing machinations and the way that we measure things and kind of push it through or sweep it under the rug obscures that fact. And the people who suffer are the kids.
When you have 20% of kids that are not meeting any standards, that's a problem to me. That's 20% of kids that need a lot of assistance. And even those 80% of kids that are approaching grade level, approaches grade level means it constitutes a passing score, but remediation is recommended in the coming year. So they're not where they need to be to move on to the next grade, but they still move on. Are they getting that extra remediation that next year? I don't know. I hope so. But I really think that, I do feel like the state of Texas has taken some steps towards making very positive changes. I will give the state of Texas credit for passing some legislation that I think can be beneficial. And, HB3 required the Texas Reading Academies of all elementary school teachers K through 2. And that was a huge investment on the part of teachers. And I really want to commend the teachers for putting in 60 hours of their own time.
They're not paid for it.
Not paid.
They have to take the training so that we can start to move the needle on.
They have to take the training so they can keep their job.
Okay.
I mean, they had to do this 60 hours, and it was a big burden on teachers. And I really want to thank the teachers for investing that time, because I think that is a huge step forward towards changing the way that we're teaching reading. They had to learn a lot of new things. And then this past legislative session, HB 1605, actually bans teaching using 3Qing, which is the Lucy Calkins method. There's a couple names for it: 3Qing, MSV. It's the look at the picture and guess the word method. So that is now not legal in the state of Texas. And they also outlawed it in colleges. So you can't teach teachers to teach kids that way either. So I think we're making good steps forward. Well, how fast are those going to be realized? I don't know.
It's a churn, but I'm telling you, people don't understand how hard it is to extract something that's bad in, let's call it public sector. Okay, that's my job. I see it every day. And I know that in that world that doesn't run on profits and losses. Okay, so what happens when it doesn't run on profits and losses? In the Fortune 500 world, if you have something that's costing you too much money or not making you enough money, like those are the two levers, like either it's revenue up or and expenses down, you get rid of it as fast as you can.
Right.
In public sector, it is not about that at all. It's about anything that is seeded and planted and starts to grow will do whatever it has to do to stay alive, whether that's another line in the tax code, which started as a pamphlet and is now fills 4 warehouses or whatever it is, or whether it's a new job or policy or way of doing things or program or anything. And so it's almost impossible to reverse those things.
It's very hard.
But I say that because it's very inspiring to see that it's happening and that even though we got sidetracked here, like our version of 9/11 was come and take it and recapture and funding. We have a ton of things that have to go to the front of the line for our trustees to address. But we're not just forgetting about literacy, and we've built enough momentum, and we have a good cross-section of teachers, administrators, certainly the trustees, moms like you, to make sure that we see it through.
Yes. And I was remiss. I forgot to mention that once the literacy committee was formed, we did have 2 other board members join us. And so Caroline Bennett and Courtney Anderson were the ones that were leading the way with the literacy committee that did the studies. And they worked really hard to put together that group of people that we talked about. who came together and did the analysis and learned about, what we're currently doing, what we should be doing. And they worked with TXReads to give them access to all the curriculum and received that report, and shared that with us. And so, we had 4 board members that partnered, with parents to make this literacy thing happen. And, I guess this is where I say they were all 4 PIPEline elected board members. We worked to get them elected because we knew that they cared about the students and that they wanted to do good things for this district. And I have to say with this, I think we are really close. We're almost there.
No, that's great. So where do we go from here? What's sort of the short-term near horizon look like? So,
you mentioned before we have some financial issues. So it's not as easy as just going out and buying a new curriculum. Also part of that HB 1605, there was included a stipend per student if you purchase curriculum that the TEA has approved of. So right now we're currently waiting on the list of TEA approved curriculum to be shared. That is expected in December. I hope that they keep to that timeline because we will need all of the next year, to, prep everything, get the curriculum, get the teachers trained and all that, and then roll out a great new curriculum that's going to teach 95% of kids to read.
Oh, that's great. Last question. Viewers, listeners to this podcast who perhaps have their own personal interest in this, a child who has struggled, and they're asking, what can I do? What does that look like?
I would say for parents who have concerns about their children's reading, obviously the first step is to reach out to your child's teacher. Schedule a conference, say, here's what I'm seeing at home. What are you seeing at school? Sometimes when classrooms are crowded and there's a lot of kids, and like my daughter was able to fake it, until she couldn't anymore. And so if at home you're noticing something, you need to let your teacher know. And if she agrees, I'm seeing this too, or let me watch that, then, maybe more evaluation is warranted. And they do have, it's called MTSS, but it's multi-tiered services for kids. And so if they need that extra help, they can get that extra help through the school. And, if it progresses to a point where you're saying we're way off base here, then you can request testing for your child to see if they have any learning disabilities that need to be identified and maybe handled by specialists. But really, the first point of contact would be your child's teacher and your school. And I would recommend partnering with them to keep an eye on things and making sure that your child's making the progress they need to make.
That's great. I can say with my own child, Lindsay, my wife, we quickly realized how rotten and backwards the whole system was. We went over that a few minutes ago, but when it came time to advocate for my child and to, take my child by the hand and say, this is how we're going to get through this. It revealed a lot of people who really did have my child's interest at heart. And we would not be where we are today. I mean, it's still an issue for us, but we kind of got out of the wilderness but we had to swim upstream, against systems that didn't work for us, but it took real people in our community, in our schools at Spring Branch to say, hey, we're going to make this right, or we're going to do what we need to do. So that was inspiring, even as it was frustrating.
Absolutely. And there are so many people out there that want to help your child. Teachers come to teaching because they love to teach kids, right? And they want to see their students succeed. But ultimately, as a parent, you are your child's best advocate, and you are the one who will go to the ends of the earth to make things happen. And so it's really important that parents, especially if they have concerns, that they stay involved and stay attentive and vigilant, making sure that you're not falling too far behind. It's a lot easier to help kids when they've fallen a little behind, but the farther it gets, the more work it takes to get them back to where they need to be. And, we know that students are learning to read in those early years. And then once they have learned to read, now it's time to read to learn. And, you have to be able to read those books to get that knowledge. And if you didn't learn to read, you can't read to learn.
Yes. Jennifer Hyland, thank you for coming and for sharing and for being honest and for being an advocate on an issue that the importance of which I underestimated, but I don't anymore. And I would encourage our listeners and viewers to use the Spring Branch ISD Pipeline website to comment in YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We can do a follow-up episode on literacy. It took Sold a Story 6 episodes, I think, and they are barely scratching the surface.
Well, there's 6 episodes. She has 4 other episodes that came before Sold a Story, which actually may be more challenging to listen to. And it's now been translated into Spanish. So everybody can listen to Sold a Story. I don't know if we're able to link it, in the comments or something.
We can.
Under the podcast, but I think that would be great and make it easy for people.
Sure. Yes. And we're trying to put sunlight on it. And to that end, please subscribe, do all the things on social media and on the platforms. It helps our visibility and it helps get the message out if you like the message and you like the format. So that's episode 3 on literacy with our special guest, Jennifer Hyland. Jennifer Hyland, thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.